one.
Here we go, folks. Welcome to another live broadcast on the Power Play Chess channel. I just want to make sure that you can all hear us and see us okay before we get going in earnest. The folks are flooding in already, I can see. But if you're out there, let me know you're out there and let me know that everything is functioning well. Before I do the introductions, just tell me what's happening with Norway in the European teams.
Oh, I'll have to look off to my side, which looks very strange
No,
on
that's
the screen.
okay.
But Magnus has been he's tried the King's India today, so he's clearly going all out every day.
Yeah.
Despite colors, and he's seems to be through his suffering phase and into his beginning the grind phase.
Oh, okay. It's all right.
Everything else is solid, but nothing discouraging for our guys for a change.
Okay.
It's not been a great European for Team Norway so far.
Yeah. Oh, right. We got our first people saying that we're okay. Looking hunky-dory. Hi, Jonathan Brewer. And others as well. We'll wait for just a few more minutes. We're doing fine. Thank you very much. Before I do introductions, we'll just wait for a few more people to gather.
I'm slightly alarmed by how far behind the camera is on me.
Oh, don't worry. That's absolutely fine. Oh, Kevin Winter. Hi, Kevin. How you doing? Kevin says England are likely to draw against Greece. We always struggle against Greece. I think they want their Elgin marbles back, Kevin. I think that's the problem. There's something quite personal now, you know. Right. Well, let me do the introductions and kick off. So, welcome everyone to the latest live broadcast and the latest New in Chess book review. And this week, our special guest is Jonathan Tisdall. Hi, John. How you doing?
Hello.
And we're discussing his book, Improve Your Chess Now. There we go. And this is a new edition of, well, they're describing it as a new in chess classic, and I think that's absolutely spot on. It is a classic. I read this many years ago. In fact, when did you actually write this, John?
I followed the sage advice of the sage of sages. Botvinnik said when you get your grandmaster title, you're obliged to write a book.
Ah.
So it would have been mid-90s.
Okay.
And it took me a ridiculously long time to do, of course, as such things you generally are with me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but you can tell because it is very well thought through. And I should say this is a new edition.
It's a new edition, but there are not a lot of changes. There's a new foreword and anything that's been rendered very anomalous by the passage of time has been footnoted and commented on. But otherwise, it's not been run through engines or anything like that. I mean, it always has been an extremely human-oriented book, and that hasn't changed. I mean, the engine might make some of the analytical parts look odd, but I don't think they look odd anyway by human terms still. So
yeah. Okay. So let's talk a few details. Who's the book aimed at?
Already a good trick question. I thought it was aimed at quite a general audience, but as I've found, the things tend to come out a lot more complicated than I expect. So my impression is that it's aimed for a reasonably high standard. Although I'm sure there's something for everybody in it, and that you will get more out of it as time goes by, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sage advice for all levels, basically. I've got a question here. Kevin says, Jonathan sounds American.
That's an interesting observation.
Great observation, Kevin.
Americans tend not to believe that. Very quickly after I left America, Americans could not identify where I was from. I suppose I've got what do they call it? The transatlantic?
Yes, a mid-Atlantic.
Mid-Atlantic, that's it. Yeah, and so I was considered Canadian for a long time, and now people are very puzzled because I've been living in Norway most of my life. So I've got some odd sounds on top of that. But yes, I am indeed originally American.
So actually, you should say where. So where were you born and where did you grow up in the States?
I'm a New Yorker, but not the city. I was born in Buffalo, so on the Canadian border, really. Spent a lot of time in Canada, so that might also help explain that. But I grew up in Syracuse, which is in the dead center of the state.
Okay.
And at the time, it was the most average city in America. They used to carry out all their market research and testing there. It was an absolute microcosm of the country.
Uh-huh.
Oddly enough.
But as you say, you've been living for actually the majority of your life in Norway.
Yeah, the majority. I did emigrate originally to London.
Yeah.
I was in London for 5 years.
Indeed. Yeah. As I remember well.
Yeah.
Playing all those tournaments together, which was great fun.
Yeah.
There was a really nice scene in London in the kind of early 80s, which was great. But you found your way to Norway, and you've played for the Norwegian team.
Yeah, I've played for the Norwegian team. I've won the Norwegian championship 3 times, and I've been representing Norway since a few years after I lived here. So it would have been, I suppose I've been officially Norwegian since something like 87, 88, something like that. Right. So it's a very long time indeed.
A long time, yeah. So let's talk about this book, Improve Your Chess Now. So as you said, you wrote it after you became a grandmaster.
As part of the Botvinnikian debt. Yeah.
Andrew Roberts asks, do we really need another book? Yes, absolutely. I can tell you.
But this is yeah, okay, go ahead. This is not another book, though. I mean, it's been around for a very long time. So it's
well, that's true. but also, I can say I read it at the time, and I've been rereading it over the past week, and there is fantastic practical advice here. All kinds of interesting wisdom, ideas for training, ideas for practical play, when you're actually at the board, but training as well. It's very, very thoughtful. You obviously put an incredible amount of time into it. I want to plunge right in with chapter 1, The Fabled Tree of Analysis. Okay, and it starts with this quote from Grandmaster Anatoly Lane. I don't think like a tree. Do you think like a tree? Okay, you're going to have to explain this one.
Good old Anatoly. I could write a whole series of books from random things he said to me, but that one really stuck in my mind. And it's a reference to probably the most famous thing about Kotov's Think Like a Grandmaster, which he explained how a grandmaster supposedly thinks. And of course, this is primarily aimed at very concrete situations where you're calculating basically tactical sequences or attacking sequences. And he described the process as the tree of analysis. And he also had sub-growths, like he had coppices, did he? And he had bushes and all sorts of things, different shrubbery.
Yeah, shrubbery, lots of shrubbery, yeah.
And so basically he would analyze very comprehensively by good old-fashioned human terms, which was, very comprehensively still by, human practical terms. And he would draw these little branches and trees. And Lane was just pointing out not only the obvious, but it was quite heretical at the time because Kotov had basically convinced everybody that he was right. And of course, there are always more than one way to approach a situation. But for some reason, people hadn't really thought to question that in any detail. And
well, I think Kotov's tree of analysis and this whole idea of candidate moves.
Candidate moves is the other one, yeah.
Yeah, were somehow such a neat theory. I think this is the point. This is very understandable and a very neat theory. And in some situations, I think absolutely applicable.
Oh, sure, and extremely useful.
Yeah, and yet in other situations, just it doesn't work at all, or at least
But
that's not
yeah,
how
yeah,
we think.
yeah. But my thesis was, I mean, that Lane was right. In fact, it's extremely unnatural.
Yeah.
It's hugely unnatural. And what I wanted to do was to examine how we think naturally and really work from there to see how that might in fact not only be truer but more efficient in many situations.
Yeah. But before we continue with this, let's look at this position. So this is actually from a different chapter. I'm jumping around now, just to completely confuse everybody. And this is from the chapter, which is The Art of Playing Bad Positions.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Black to play. So I think we've already had a correct answer actually. Pedonio Rosso.
It's white to play, actually.
Oh no, I beg your pardon. It's white to play.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you play if you were playing white in this position? White to play. What would you do with white? Yes. Now that I see it, that it's actually white to play, it's a whole lot easier. Yeah, we've got some interesting comments here. Pedonio Rosso says it works perfectly. The tree of analysis works perfectly for chess engines, though. Yeah, but we're not machines. I think that's the point.
Yeah, that is the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we're looking for a white to play. What should white play in this position? Which I'm trying to wake everybody up here. White to play. Oh, everyone's being a bit slow now. White to play. What should you do here? We will come back to the tree of analysis. Wow, I can't believe it. We have no suggestions at the moment. White to play. Normally we get flooded. Come on, wake up everybody. I think I should put this in context. This position was... Pedonio Rosso says, rook takes something.
There's only one thing that can be.
Afraid not. Kevin says, can I phone a friend? Pawn says, rook f7, Hail Mary. Hail Mary, I think he means. Yes, rook f7 check is a sensible move.
Yeah, there are probably more than one, but that's definitely the most sensible.
Definitely the most sensible move. Instead, rook a7 was played. So this is played by Donna. Why was this not the best idea from white? So now it's black to play. Black to play. Black to play. It's all gone very quiet again. Black to play. Come on, folks. Can't believe it. Everyone's sleepy today. Rook h1 now. Yes, indeed. Thank you, pawn. That is a bit of a shocker. And king g3 with the unstoppable threat of rook e1 mate. Now, that is a tough one. And
yeah, it's traumatic, really.
That was traumatic, yeah. And you included this basically in the chapter, not a swindling chapter, but the chapter The Art of Playing Bad Positions. And it just shows, one has to maintain concentration the whole way. Never, ever let up. I'm sure, I don't know, I can think of situations where I've kind of assumed the result was in the bag and then blown it. Do you have a particular one that still kind of haunts you?
Gosh, I probably have loads of them. I don't know if I have anything as painful as that. Um, a one move blackout. I mean, nothing leaps to mind where I was that winning and managed to lose so quickly. I tend to do things more gradually,
I,
methodically.
I've got one that's as bad as that.
Uh-huh.
And I overlooked a mate in two, a queen sack, when I was like a piece and a piece up and checking his king to oblivion, and yeah, that one haunts me. That's really bad. But that wasn't. I'm not sure that was relaxation. It was slightly different. It was uh, time pressure and being trying to be too careful actually,
Aha,
which
that's
is
interesting.
yeah, trying to be too careful and not calculating things through properly.
I don't know if I probably did mention something resembling this at some point in the book, but
Yeah.
I do remember having a period where I suddenly, one thing that I found was quite remarkable about my uh, sort of active career was I very rarely had ridiculous oversights where I would just miss a very short sequence or just hang something regardless of time pressure, which
Mm.
was often the case. But then at some point, I had a spell where I started to do this all the time, like with amazing regularity. Like I can remember, not quite as traumatic as that, but I can remember like um, falling for obvious cheapos, like up a couple of pawns maybe, or in a very sharp position, missing an absolutely ridiculous blunt threat, this kind of
Mm.
thing. And it occurred to me that I thought maybe one of my childhood mechanisms had been on autopilot for so long that it just died off. And
Mm.
that was the old Blumenfeld rule,
Ah.
which I probably mentioned in the book, where
Yeah.
basically just before you move, you just check. It's just a horrific blunder check. It's
Yeah.
sort of back to back to the position, look at it with clean eyes, make sure you haven't put something on pre, basically, and then move. And it occurred to me that I assimilated that very consciously, very early, and it had served me very well. But it occurred to me that at some point, maybe it had just shut off, and I was now too focused on the
Yeah.
trees suddenly, and so I just consciously tried to do that a bit more again. Helped, found other ways to ruin positions, but not blunder things away immediately.
Okay, listen, let's get stuck back into the fabled tree of analysis. So Kotov quotes this game Boleslavsky against Fleur from Moscow 1950. So
Mm.
starts out as a carrow. White obviously has some initiative for the pawn, but it gets to a position which is absolutely critical. And basically it starts around here. It seems to me that in these kind of positions where one person has given up a pawn, there's lots of piece interaction, or you realise that given one more move, then this king could just escape, or bishop e7 and castles, and the king will escape. You have to start calculating. So
Mm.
it's in these kind of positions where we can start to think like a tree, or start to take on board Kotov's thoughts. So
Well, this is a position that lends itself to, yeah, pure number crunching. Yeah,
yeah.
this is where yeah, whatever you're looking for the most effective techniques for handling a position like this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is a little bit before the position that was quoted by Kotov. So let's just ask everyone, how would you play here as white, or what would your thoughts be with white? White to play, what would your thoughts be here? I don't think, no one expected to have to work on this one. Yeah, this might be a bit tough. Pawn says breaking through somehow with a sack. Paul Kirby says bishop takes e6. Yeah, well, there we go. Yeah, absolutely. It could be time to sack. I mean, that isn't sacking the rook. Well, it's probably a bit too much. It's not completely stupid, because now the king is unable to castle. So, I mean, I would consider that. But I think having seen bishop takes e6, I think one's more likely to go in for this, because it's somehow more forceful, actually. Sorry?
It's cheaper also.
It's cheaper, exactly. So, and this was the game continuation. And here, actually, Fleur played bishop e7. But that lost quite prosaically, actually. After this, well, the pinning and winning was pretty simple. After this,
yeah, it's a bit of a shocker how.
Yeah, basically, white is just a pawn up, and
I suppose it's very practical.
Yeah,
in a way, though. You consider this.
But the thing is, this is not just a healthy extra pawn. Black's king is so bad that this is. I think it's kind of surprising that he went in for this. But given that king f7 is a very, very tricky position, it's funny. I mean, of course, I know this position just from the Think Like a Grandmaster book, but I went back and had a look at this, and yes, I know the continuation. The correct continuation here is rook takes f6. But actually, I was trying to kind of look at this with fresh eyes. And actually, my thought here was to go rook e1. And I was sort of trying to be honest with myself and thinking, well, do you know what? I might well go rook de1 in this position. It seems to me that it's quite a practical move, because it's controlling e8. Now rook takes f6 looks like it could be a real killer with the rook on e1. And we might just be sort of floating the bishop somewhere as well. I don't think this is...
Does it work?
I don't think it's trivial to defend against. And actually, the move that you pointed out in the book is absolutely correct for black. But this is still good enough. I mean, of course, I checked it with the machine afterwards, and the machine says that white has enough to draw this position. But black has to find some very good moves here, which I think is interesting. So let's ask. Okay, I'll flip it round. How should black defend this position? This is not simple.
No, another way of looking at it, of course, is if you use this as a start position. I don't remember if I did mention rook e1, yeah?
You did mention rook e1, and you also mentioned black's best defense as well.
Okay.
But I'm assuming that was kind of...
Nice to know it stands up over time.
Yeah. But I don't think this is a simple... I look at this with human eyes, and I don't think this is a simple defense, basically. It seems to me. This is still really difficult.
Yeah, but it's like... it's like my entire not thinking like a tree thesis is based on, in positions like this, our natural inclination is to immediately start crunching a line that attracts us. Right. So, I mean, it's just a question of, as white, if that move attracted you, you should be crunching here. If rook f6 attracted you, instead, the more violent move, the more forcing move.
Okay, so
which always feels more natural to me as a starting place. But the whole point is, I think that this is not only natural, but it's also an information gathering process.
Right.
If we're
Okay, so
being very
this is the difference
aware of
between
what we're doing.
this is the difference between you and Kotov. That basically, first of all, you're saying it doesn't feel natural to select candidate
No
moves.
candidate moves or trees.
No.
In this kind of position.
Basically,
no.
you go with your first instinct and run through
and
that.
Generally probably the most violent instinct as well.
Yeah.
Which I think also holds up. I mean, I know that engines used to be inclined that way. I don't know if they're allowed so much freedom that they just do different things now. But I think that extreme violence is generally the most attractive thing to our
I mean, when you say extreme violence,
reflexes,
basically the most forcing move. So, here that is the most forcing move. It's funny, when I was looking at this again, I was trying to be honest with myself and thinking, would I actually play this? Could I see this? Well, maybe, but I think once you get to this position, I don't think this is very easy to spot, actually, and there's kind of a psychological reason for this, I think. So let's throw this out there. So how should White play from here? I should say this is winning, which, well, once you know there's something there, of course, that's a massive clue. And we never get someone tapping us on our shoulder during the game saying, okay, there is a checkmate here. Kevin says, we like a knockout rather than winning a boxing match on points. I think if we can force a win, I think that's it. Then we know that it's decisive, basically. Ramildo.
The thing is that this line is also extremely safe.
In the sense that it's a draw. If you want to,
there are lots of easy draws. Yeah, if you.
That's true. Yeah, we've got Bishop A5 has been suggested.
Cool.
I'm guessing Queen B5 is probably a good idea, because I want to exchange queens, and there could be a very nice way to exchange queens with a Queen G5 check, for example.
Yeah, and that's probably the most important thing to notice about the position once you start analyzing it, is how unbelievably important it is to prevent this queen from entering the defense.
Right.
I mean, it's a key factor in almost every calculation. But you have to spot it once.
Yeah. But this is interesting that, as you say, along the way you kind of pick up clues about the position, and that feeds into your basic instinct. But I think it's really interesting. No one has come up with the idea yet. I don't think this is
basically, I think, you find a lot. You are naturally attracted to one line. You charge down that line. You pick up information as you go, and if it doesn't lead to clear enough or a satisfactory enough conclusion, you then go back armed with the information you've picked up along the way, and now you're in a much better place to consider if there are candidate moves that are relevant to the information or obstacles that you've picked up along the way.
Right. So
I don't think in tactical positions it's either natural or effective to try and candidate first.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of examples of how this applies in practice and with students.
Yeah, well, we might move on to another example in a second, but I think it's very interesting. No one has spotted this, and I'll show the main line here. So Queen G4 check, King F7, and the win here is Queen C4 check. And the reason that I found this difficult to spot is I think lateral queen moves are quite tricky to spot, in my experience. But this is the win, basically. I mean, in this position here, this is a classic kind of a branch or a hedge or shrubbery, as you put it.
One
has to number crunch here. Here you have
Yeah,
to number crunch.
I don't recall how Kotov actually drew this one.
Yeah. So I mean, let's
By drawing, I mean, like in
yeah.
terms of trees and shrubbery or diagrams. But
And this is a good one because here, yeah, this brings the rook into the game. This is absolutely crucial, and it does it with tempo. So after this, we've got queen c7 and then check.
of course, somebody who's calculating, but maybe less of a calculator might be guided by trying to just check the queen into the most central position, for example.
Yeah, maybe. I think this. I mean, I find this one very difficult. But I mean, you go on in chapter 2 to talk about methods of how to improve your calculation, actually, and I think that was very interesting. So
Visualization, basically.
visualization, and you're a big fan of blindfold chess and exercises. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, again, it comes down to a fairly simple argument. Basically, our calculation or stroke analysis, these are two very difficult terms to keep apart or use as separate entities. I suppose a calculation I think of as more like that, more number crunching, and analysis is sort of more of a whole that incorporates also maybe intuitive and strategic and planning and things like that. But anyway, almost all of that takes place off the board. I don't know what percentage of the chess iceberg is in your head as compared to on the board, but I would assume it's a lot. It must be like 99% of the game is actually taking place in your head. So if you're going to actually have a degree of success, it is by far the most essential muscle because most of the game is being played off the board.
Okay,
really.
So I'm going to test everyone with a bit of blindfold play now.
This is my favorite one.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say the moves, and I'd like you to think, what should white play in this position? So this is a real test of your concentration and your ability to visualize. So are you ready, everyone? Concentrate, full concentration needed. I'm curious to see whether anyone gets this at all. Right. White plays pawn to e4. Black plays knight f6. Knight c3 from white. d5 from black. e5 white. d4 black. Knight ce2. Knight e4 c3. And then black plays d takes c3. Okay, maybe should I write it in the chat? Would that help? Let's see.
Yeah,
I'll write it in the chat and see if that helps, folks. I mean, actually, when I'm visualizing, when I'm sort of playing blindfold, actually, I prefer not to look at the moves. I prefer to close my eyes. I find
good. I'm glad you mentioned that.
I find it very distracting to look at moves, to look at the script. I just like to do it in my head.
I think I might have mentioned this. I think I might have mentioned this in the book.
Yeah.
That I find it more useful to have somebody read out the moves. I find looking at the moves very distracting.
Exactly.
And also, you'll see famously people like Shirov and Svidler and other people who will. Ivan Shuk's another one. They'll calculate for a while, and then you can see it at a critical moment. They will look up at the ceiling instead of at the board because they're starting to find where the pieces are on the board is a distraction to the position in the head that they're analyzing. In the eventual prequel that's being written now for the last 10 years, we're finally going to discuss an issue that was fairly well. It wasn't known at all, and it still shocks, I think, the vast majority of players and trainers, and that's the people who can't visualize, who are physically incapable of visualizing.
Do you think there are people like that?
Oh, there are definitely people like that. You should look it up. It's a recently it's a recently identified. I don't know if you should call it a condition, but there's some percentage. It's reasonably high, 7-10% maybe, of people. If you say who think that when you're talking about in your mind's eye or a mental picture, they think you're speaking abstractly, poetically. Because if you say, imagine a blue horse, they can't do it. They can't do anything. No mental imagery whatsoever.
That's interesting.
And yeah, especially when they're playing chess, and you wonder how on earth are you calculating even 2 ply ahead if you can't. But it's fascinating because there are people like this, and there always have been.
So I went to but maybe that's the exceptional in some ways. Not sure.
It's different. No, listen, I can tell you. It's called aphantasia.
Aphantasia,
with a
okay.
PH.
Yeah.
You should. It's fascinating because I've spoken about this to several GMs, to trainers and stuff, and they think, no, you're kidding. That's not possible.
Okay,
but it is, and I can remember having working with a few people over the years who could not, and I thought, okay, for some they've really neglected this muscle in their brain. But there are some people who are absolutely incapable of visualizing, but they still manage to play. And it's absolutely an obsession with me now, trying to figure out how they do it.
But it's okay. This is maybe we should stick to those that can visualize and try to improve this skill. Because let me tell you, I went to a talk a couple of years ago by a blind player called, I think his name's Chris Ross, who's he's an English guy. He brought out a book a couple of years ago about his games, and he's a strong player. He's rated at something like 2200. His visualization is fantastic.
That's even. And that's equally interesting.
A very interesting case. So basically, he said that clearly he's had to practice this skill, and it started. He said when he'd be playing a club game, and he'd travel back on the bus with a friend of his, and they'd always discuss their games on the bus. Now, obviously, he didn't have recourse to his board where he could touch the pieces, and so he was forced to visualize, and the two of them would discuss their games, and he realized that basically his visualization was just getting better and better. And as you say in the book, I should mention the book again, there we go, Improve Your Chess Now, available from newinchess.com, €24.95 or dollars. You discuss this in the book, that visualization, calculation, this is a skill that you can practice and improve. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, and very clear. I mean, and I know from inflicting this method on people that it works. They tend to, you can see improvement, sometimes shockingly quick.
And you mentioned about Belyavsky, that he was from tournaments.
Yeah, his entire life, in fact. This was the thing that, he was the person who definitely shoved me in the direction of becoming interested in this. There were 2 key moments in terms of the visualization chapter and thinking. And that one was the conversation with Belyavsky, where he said his own personal practice was to play through some heavily annotated games in his head as a regular routine. I think it's the only thing he's done his entire life. I know he still does it. And he kept his level incredibly high for a very, very long time.
Kevin says that Chris...
and I think it was more rigorous when he was younger.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Kevin says Chris passed away in 2021. Blind faith was... I hadn't realised that. Oh, that's really sad. I tell you, it was a really interesting talk he gave. Oh, I didn't realise that at all. Thanks, Kevin, for mentioning that. But it was very
I'll have to look
impressive
that
what
up.
he said. Yeah, his book is Blind Faith. It was very, very
And he's
interesting.
what was his?
Chris Ross. Thanks for letting us know, Kevin. Sorry, I'm really sorry to hear that. Yeah, so as you mentioned, Beliavsky played through. You mentioned this in the book. He used to play through 5 games in his head every day as a kind of mental training. And
Yeah, this is his way of keeping fit.
yeah, I think this is an excellent idea. I was talking. Somebody mentioned this on Twitter the other day. David Smerdon in Australia mentioned this on Twitter or X or whatever we call it. He said, "Oh, I'm about to go to the dentist," and he said, "My usual routine when I'm at the dentist is to visualize a study position beforehand, and then when I'm, leaning back at the dentist, I need to distract myself." So he basically tries to solve a study while the dentist is doing something unpleasant, just to take his mind away from it. And it's really funny because I do exactly the same thing when I'm at the dentist. I've done this always. I've always done this at the dentist. I usually pick on some opening that I've been having struggling with, and play through the opening and kind of discuss ideas in my head while the drill goes to work on my teeth. It's great distraction. It really is. It just takes you to another place, basically. So visualization is really, really important, and a skill that you discuss, and you have lots of exercises. And indeed, everyone has leapt on this idea and mentioned Queen A4 check.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, in terms of visualization, the two things besides Beliavsky, the other thing, and I suppose it's the thing that sets the book apart, really, because it has one clear contribution to sort of training theory, and that's the stepping stone.
Okay. So explain about the stepping stone. So this is a technique.
The stepping stone is basically, the argument is if you can increase your visualization skill to the point that you can bring one position into clear focus when needed, you're then capable of analyzing to infinite depth by exercising this skill at the point where the position becomes fuzzy in your mind. That's basic. That's it in a nutshell.
Okay. So, and you provide various examples. Yeah. Just to...
And this just occurred to me at a very, sensible point. I noticed I was getting fuzzy.
Lots of people have mentioned in this position that after d takes c3, Queen A4 check is the classic trick to win the knight.
I like to use this position as the conclusion of a set of simpler Queen A4 or A5 check tactics.
Right.
Yeah.
The question is how should Black play here? What's the best that Black can do? This is mean. It's a mean one, really. We've suckered them into this.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's why it's my favorite, because it's an extremely unusual tactic, actually.
It is, yeah.
In terms of a trick.
Yeah. This is a question for you, folks. Black to play. What should you do? Let's flip it round. I never know whether it makes it easier or more difficult when I flip the board, but anyway, let's find out. Black to play. I suspect that
flipping the board's another thing from the book, isn't it? I recommend flipping the board a lot.
Oh, do you? I missed that.
Yeah. Mostly because it occurred to me how powerful it is from a conversation with Jules Hodgson.
Yeah.
It's quite entertaining. Jules I think he was preparing to play. He was white against Yasha Murray, and he really wanted to play the Knight of Sicilian. So he was trying to figure out if he could play c3 and move on with white. If Yasha would play e5, and then he could go c4 and then play the Knight of Sicilian with white, even though he was with the normal black Knight of Sicilian, even though he was white. And at that point, So we were entertaining Jules's train of thought, and we just looked at the position after c3, e5, c4, knight f6, and we thought nobody in their right mind would play d3 in that position as white. You would play knight c3.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how powerful that feeling is just because of the color of the pieces.
Oh dear, we've got some fairly flippant comments here.
Do GMs flip the board in their mind while playing? That's a really good question.
Yeah, I think I do.
That's coming up. Do you?
Yeah, I think I flip
Cool.
it. Yeah.
That's really interesting because I was in the next edition, in the prequel. I'm going to suggest this as a conscious technique for advanced visualizers.
No, I flip the board in there. Yeah, definitely.
Because it's amazing how helpful that is.
Yeah,
if you can do it.
Mahendran TM has come up with the right move. In fact, Queen A4 check is problematic after Knight D7 because Queen takes allows Knight C5 and a thumping great check on D3, and the game careers on somehow. Yeah, it's interesting. So if we just come back to this position, in fact, Queen A4 check probably isn't the best move. Maybe
no,
B takes C3.
B takes C3 is really horrible for black.
Yeah,
that knight's in big trouble, big trouble.
Yeah. So in fact, Queen A4 check is not best.
I think after Knight C5, black's much better, isn't he? In the trap.
Yeah, probably. I was thinking about this earlier, actually, and in this position, I mean, you don't actually need to take the knight. Of course.
No, probably not. Probably better not to. But it's still
you could do this, or maybe even D4 here. Those are my thoughts. That might be better
because Knight C5. The Knight to C5 is very dangerous if you don't do something.
Yeah. So it's still basically quite okay for white, but yeah, not Queen takes E4. That really is quite unpleasant. But I mean, there are lots of very interesting examples of your thoughts. I mean, visualization, very, very important. And you give there are lots of very nice exercises in here. For those arriving late, let me just mention again, we're discussing Jonathan's book, Improve Your Chess Now. I'll just put that in here. You can get it directly from New in Chess. It's absolutely superb. Lots of really sound advice. And I like the final chapter, actually. Well, I like all of it. Wisdom and advice. There's some great stuff in there with some wonderful examples. We've got prophylaxis and killer instinct and all kinds of stuff. And basically, you've assembled all kinds of quotes from a variety of people. I don't know if you have a favourite quote in that final chapter.
Is that right? Is that, well, I mean, the final quote is my favourite quote maybe of all time. But the is that where I told about the Patrick Wolf?
Oh yeah, the Patrick Wolf one. Yeah. You talk about that.
That had a profound effect on me. It was one of these things like, oh, why didn't anybody ever tell me that? And it occurred to me that Vidit said something very similar just now when he won the candidates. And people were asking him if he was preparing for the candidates. And he started talking about winning the Grand Swiss. He says it's like getting a chocolate pudding. I don't know if you saw this interview.
Go on. What did he say?
And he was no, he was saying like people are asking about preparing for the candidates, and we said, he says this tournament's like a fine dessert. He says it's time for me to sit down and savor it, rather than thinking at all about what was to come and what next. Yeah, people. Yeah, but it strikes me as something very similar to the Wolf quote, and I think the Wolf quotes if you hear about it early enough, it can actually help
Go on.
you.
We'll tell everyone what it is. Go
Uh,
on. What's the Patrick Wolf quote?
isn't it here?
Go on. Tell
You
me what
can't.
it is.
Is it in the book?
Yeah, it is. I
It's in
remember
the book,
reading
isn't
it.
it?
I can't remember where.
You expect me to. You can't expect me to remember it accurately. But basically, it was about his state of mind. I think it was he was about to. He knew he was about to win. He had a completely winning position, one that's not honorable. I mean,
Yeah.
he's probably he has up vast amounts of material about to, his opponent was clearly about to resign, and he just very consciously relaxed, sat back, and really internalized that feeling of winning an important game,
Mm.
of experiencing the pleasure, the accomplishment, dispelling any nerves about getting it wrong, just taking in all the positives very, very consciously. And I know that whenever I was in such a situation, I would just immediately get nervous that something was going to go wrong.
Yeah.
I would still find a way to, I have had a very bad sporting psychology. And it was just it struck me very powerfully that, of course, you should do that kind of thing. And it was the kind of thing that I'd never heard anybody else verbalize,
Okay.
actually.
Well,
And even now, when Vidit talked about it, it was taken as that's just kind of a hilarious thing to say about. They asked him about the candidates. He started talking about puddings.
no, but that's good.
It's not what he.
I
Of
like
course,
that because actually,
that's not what he was doing.
do you know, everyone knows I'm slightly obsessed with a football team here in the Premiership called Brentford Football Club.
Yes, I'm well aware. Yeah.
And they're perhaps a Scandinavian team actually.
Yeah.
But the manager is a guy called Thomas Frank, and he basically has a sports psychology background. He was never a professional player, but he went into coaching from studying sports psychology.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, and actually some of the stuff he comes out with is bang on and directly applicable. And he has his own version of the Vidit pudding anecdote. He calls it the 24-hour rule. He says, after we've won a game, we don't move on to the next thing just like that. He says...
You never hear a manager say that kind of thing.
He said, we call it the 24-hour rule. We go back. He said, I'm going back tonight. I'm having a glass of wine. I want to relax. I want to really enjoy the feeling of winning. And then Monday morning, we go again. And we prepare. But we have the 24-hour rule. And that's whether you win or lose. You have the 24-hour rule.
Okay. Win or lose.
Yeah, whatever happens, you have the 24-hour rule. You digest what's happened. You take the positives from the game. Whatever's happened, sometimes you lose, but there can be positives from it. You digest what's happened. Then on Monday, you go back to work. It's a bit like, and on the seventh day we rest. that kind of thing.
Yeah, but most managers will just immediately talk about the next thing.
No, he's great. He said we have the 24-hour. We enjoy the game. We look back and we enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that you can gain by doing that, and almost nobody thinks like that.
Yeah, I really like it actually. And then, bang, Monday morning you're back on it. I think it's really good.
Especially if you're the type of person who is nervous or dwells on what can go wrong. I think it's extremely a good way of combating that inclination.
Let me throw in another game.
Getting some
just something practical because this is a very.
Oh, I remember this now. Yeah,
this is a very different kind of position. I'm going to flip it around because we are.
Yeah, this is very different from most of the other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the first position we looked at the Boleslavsky Fleur game is calculation, that's visualization, and it's tricky stuff, but it's crunching, it's number crunching. But this is a very different kind of situation. So could you talk through how one might approach this position if it's not too long ago since you considered
it's very long ago. I can vaguely remember what the answer is.
Basically,
And I'm
basically,
I'm trying to come to the
White has just played Rook C1, and of course we always
so
need to.
presumably
Yeah, we need to
presumably
examine.
C4 is
Yeah,
is is the concept.
yeah. So let's ask everyone out there, what should Black play here? This is a tricky one, but this isn't. This is basically not about. Well, there is some calculation here.
Okay. Now it's starting to come. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, this is much more analysis than calculation, but it's the same kind of things. You will probably select something you want to look at first.
Yeah.
Like, let's say, maybe the most natural thing to do here is.
Well, we've already had we've had this move suggested.
Rook F3. Sure, I think certain people will definitely look at that first.
So I love the way you say certain people.
Oh, yeah, I think like me, for example, it's the kind of thing I would look at first.
Yeah, it's a kind of a very direct way of playing. But when I look at this and I think,
yeah, just on the question of
this looks
just on the most violent type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm looking
But
at the
this
most
is
violent.
refutable, I take it back to Bishop. Yeah,
This looks
and
like
this
a
is not going
violent
to work.
way.
You'll have to take back.
Yeah, and I assume this.
Yeah,
This should be good.
yeah,
Unless Queen D7.
yeah. And now, since you can't play Rook F8 in one go, this should be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Queen D7 still a little bit tricky actually, but
Still might have some compensation.
yeah, there's a bit of condensation there. Yeah.
It's definitely something that you would look at, but this is the kind of position you might do a couple of quick stabs and then try and use that information.
Yeah.
This is what it's going to come down to. The other thing is what's the starting position?
That's the starting position.
You might also consider knight d7. That looks like an extremely natural thing to consider.
Just targeting the pawn, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a problem with this move, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, and I assume the problem now is knight d4.
And
you have e6 problems.
Yeah, this looks...
Or positional problems, yeah.
Yeah, positional problems, basically.
Yeah, that's... Now you think to yourself, oh, yeah, that justifies his last move, which was rook c1.
So basically, if c4 is a threat, then... And we can't find anything...
And presumably knight... Yeah.
This, I wouldn't say this is simple, but I think one can work it out logically, actually.
Yeah, to me, this is like, you look at a couple of things, it's the same kind of thing, but it's just much more positional. It's almost like process of elimination kind of thing. And although here it would be now, it's much more natural that you would stop and think more in terms of candidates trying to address your issues rather than
yeah.
I have a feeling I remember what he did.
Well, considering that time is running out, I'm going to give the move. He actually played Queen C8. You didn't give the rest of the game.
Yes, I do remember that.
But Queen C8 is I mean, you explained it
extremely logical move, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, because the idea is that after C4, one can play Rook D8, and actually White's queen is rather embarrassed in that position.
And it also addresses the E6 problem.
Exactly.
So it probably creates a lot of other...
Yeah, so actually after Queen C8, because it covers this, then one can play Knight D7 to attack the pawn on E5. It's a very clever idea. But yeah, you explain it brilliantly in the book. Listen, time is running out. I'm going to say it one more time. Improve your chess now. And it's an excellent book, available from newinchess.com. You can get it.
I'm just looking at the chat now. Yes, I've been to the Good Night. Brilliant place. Everybody should go.
Oh, really?
It's definitely a landmark now for any chess player visiting Oslo. That's
good to know. Yeah, so everyone, €24.95 or dollars, available from newinchess.com. I warmly recommend this book. There is so much interesting stuff there. it's, as you said, it's actually very condensed.
Yeah.
It's boiled down, really great advice. I think it's a fantastic book. It's very thought provoking, and that in itself is a recommendation. So there we go.
And if you're a fan of Dvoretsky, the passage of time has allowed us to put a very compelling quote on the top of the book, top of the front cover.
Dvoretsky says, "I can recommend to read it and to think about it." Yep.
Yeah, so he was a fan.
He was a fan, that's all we need to know. So listen, John, thank you very much for coming along this evening.
Did we field all the questions? Just curious if there are any quickies.
Is there a hardback available? Don't know. I think there's an
No,
definitely an ebook. Definitely an ebook.
Yes, there is an ebook.
Yeah. But yeah, it's out there now, folks. Right, I'm going to call things to a close. Thanks everyone for attending. John, thanks very much for
Sure thing. Always a pleasure.
For attending as well. And more stuff coming on the channel very soon. Watch out for the next live stream. The next one will be in about 4 weeks' time. That's how we're trying to organise things. So look out for the news. By the way, Kevin says, is it a reissue or updated?
It is basically a reissue. Like it's got a new foreword and it's got some commentary inserted when things have dated badly, but it's not it's not updated in any sense. Like the engines have not interfered with the analysis, or there's no new material. It's just it's more or less a reissue.
But I can say to everyone, highly relevant. There's some fantastic stuff in there. It's really good. Right. Thanks everyone. I'm going to click the off button now. So